Welcome to the Convergent Impact Leadership Podcast. I'm Eric Savickas, a leadership coach, retired Army officer, and someone who cares deeply about building people-centered leadership in the fire service. This podcast is a place for honest conversations, practical insights, and leadership ideas that help teams grow stronger inside the firehouse and beyond. Whether you're leading a crew or shaping a department, I'm glad you're here. Today, I'm joined by Ken Watkins, Executive Director of the Colorado State Fire Chiefs. Ken recently stepped into this statewide leadership role after retiring as Fire Chief of the Grand Junction Fire Department, where he served for 17 years and helped guide the organization through significant growth in personnel, stations, and service demand. Before his time in Grand Junction, Ken spent 25 years with the Westminster Fire Department, rising through the ranks from firefighter to deputy chief. Throughout his career, he has played an active leadership role across Colorado and nationally, including serving on the Colorado Fire Commission as Fire Chief Section Chair for the Colorado Municipal League, and as past president of both the Colorado State Fire Chiefs and the Missouri Valley Division of International Association of Fire Chiefs. Ken holds a master's degree in public administration from the University of Colorado, is a graduate of the National Fire Academy's Executive Fire Officer Program, and is credentialed as Chief Fire Officer through the Center of Public Safety Excellence. Now in his role with the Colorado State Fire Chiefs, he continues to support departments and leaders across Colorado as they navigate the evolving challenges facing the fire service. Ken, I am so glad to have you here today. I've been looking forward to speaking with you for a while, and so happy you've gotten to carve out a little bit of time to join us today.
Yeah, thank you, Eric. I've been looking forward to it myself. I know we talked about it a while ago, and just trying to get our schedules together is sometimes a challenge. But great opportunity to share a little bit about my background and my journey, and I just appreciate you reaching out.
Yeah, we were gonna record last October at the Keystone Leadership Conference, but so hectic there, so
Yeah,
many other conversations going on and great speakers and everything. So I think this is a better opportunity to really just sit down and talk to each other. As I do with most guests, almost every guest, I want to hear your story, and that's what I think people are tuning in about. I think it's almost as if you've had two now on your third career, right? You were in Westminster for 25 years and an entire, almost 2 decades at Grand Junction. So talk to us about how your career's gone and what got you into the fire service in the beginning and then how it progressed.
sure. Goes back quite a ways, actually. I'm actually on my 44th year in the fire service. But prior to that, when I was in high school, actually, I had started thinking about a public safety career. Didn't really consider college at the time. I grew up in a family that was, we really didn't talk about college. We couldn't afford it. And so my dad was a welder. And my mom worked for the phone company. So I started thinking of other options and I started thinking of public safety. I had some friends that were both fathers at the time, were both fire and police officers. So started talking to them, getting the bug, took a few courses while in high school, actually, related to it. And then after graduation from high school, I joined the military, the United States Army, with the intent to be a police officer. And so I was a military police officer in the Army. And then as I was getting out of the Army, started to wonder if that's really what I wanted to do, being on the law enforcement side, or if I wanted to be on the fire side. At the base I was at, they were offering an EMT class. And so I took an EMT class before I got out of the military and decided to pursue both and see which came up. I started applying for both police officer and firefighter jobs in Colorado. I wanted to stay in Colorado at the time. I was born and raised here and wanted to stay here. So kind of an interesting story that I like to tell is I actually was hired at a police department and a fire department on the same day. I was made a job offer on the same day and ended up flipping a coin and choosing
Really?
Westminster Fire Department after that coin flip. And so that's how I ended up at Westminster.
And so were you, when you were in the Army, were you stationed here in Colorado or somewhere else? I know you said you applied to jobs out here in Colorado, but where were you stationed?
Well, so yeah, I joined the Army to see the world and didn't go far, strangely. I had spent basic training in military police school at Fort McClellan, Alabama. And then I was trying to go overseas, but they were the MP graduating classes before me, they sent a lot of them overseas. So
Mm,
my first duty station was supposed to be Fort Hood, Texas, and instead, it was switched at the last minute to Fort Carson, Colorado. So I ended up at Fort Carson.
probably a
That
better
was
deal
be
than Fort Hood, I would say.
Yeah, and the reason I was sent to Fort Carson is because it was 1980, and there was an incident called the Mario Boat Lift, where a lot of folks from Cuba came over and were brought into the country, and so then they were put in a couple different places to be processed, either to stay in the United States or out. So I was at Fort Carson just for a short time, only a couple weeks, and then I was shipped out to Fort McCoy, Wisconsin, where one of the camps was, and then I spent about 6 months there, and
Okay.
then back to Fort Carson for a few months, and then here's another strange part of joining the Army, see the world. There was one of the things that our unit did was we had an AWOL apprehension unit, and we had an office in downtown Denver, and they needed somebody that knew the streets of Denver, and I was the only person in the unit that knew Denver. And so they actually moved me to Denver. And so here I am in my hometown in the United States Army. And
Wow,
now I'm
that's
a
wild.
AWOL apprehension investigator.
I
So,
ended
and
up
that's what I wrote wrote my time out as.
I ended up here at Fort Carson in my second assignment, got assigned Korea first, but when you do that, you get your assignment of choice, and so picked Colorado as a good option, but then lots of other places, but made it back here after retiring, so
Good for you. I traveled a lot in that last job. Even though I was stationed here, I was rarely here in that. I was basically traveling all over the country um, in that role.
so the coin flip happened and you went into fire service.
Hmm.
At what point in the and I'm not gonna do math here in public, but 25 years in Westminster and then 17 following that at Grand Junction, at what point in your career do you start thinking about leadership stuff?
Well, so it's another strange question. I appreciate the question because when I've talked to new firefighters, they have a hard time believing this. I don't know if it was just influence, but I actually, when I was shortly out of the fire academy, started to think about, well, in the academy, basic academy, there was some classes that we talked about building your own uh, your own strategic plan, which is when I think back about it now, that really was kind of far reaching, I think, back then, to think about an individual strategic plan or your individual mission statement, those kind of things. And so we did a little bit of that, and that kind of made a time to reflect on where do you want to go with this career. And so I started thinking about, do you want to be a firefighter? Do you want to be, move up through the ranks into an officer role or what? And I actually had the thought that I would like to, in about 25 years, be a chief officer. And I thought it'd take about that long to get through. I didn't, I'm a brand new employee. I don't know how long it takes to get promoted or anything, but I'm thinking, maybe in 25 years I could be a chief officer. So I really actually started back then thinking about it. And then at the time at Westminster, you had to, if you wanted to be an officer, we had of the firefighter ranks, we had the basic firefighter rank, and then we had what was called senior firefighter, which basically meant you were either an engineer or a paramedic. And so you had to make a choice between either one of those roles if you wanted to be an officer. At the time, basic firefighter rank was not able to move into a supervisory role. So you had to take that step first. And so I ended up making the choice to go to paramedic school and going down the medical route instead of the engineer route. And so did that. And I was a paramedic for a few years. And then I think, when you become a paramedic, you start to really start thinking about leadership because you do end up leading a lot of scenes. And even though you may have your officer there, your lieutenant or captain with you there, that's managing the whole scene, you're managing the patient and you're making a lot of leadership decisions, which may be, reflected to the officer to help you get those things done. But that really started my leadership journey, I think, is once I decided to be a paramedic and move into that role, then I'd already decided, well, if I'm going to be an officer, I got to go that way.
Yeah, nice. And so as you reflect back, any pivotal leadership moments in your career that stand out? I know I've said it other times on the podcast. For me, it always seems like the ones that you look back on in hindsight saying, man, I blew that, or I could have done that better, or, it's not necessarily the ones where you're high-fiving each other as it being a success, but what stands out to you as a pivotal moment?
I think one of the things that I've heard other people talk about, and I went through it myself, is when you're going into that first line supervisor position, and also to other positions too, I think you start to think about, well, who else is interested in this position? And, I remember specifically thinking about when I was going to test for lieutenant at the time at Westminster, that was the first line supervisory rank or first level supervisory rank. And I remember thinking, well, I think I could do a better job than so and so. And so I should probably test because I don't want to work for that person. So that may not be the pivotal moment, but I know that helped me kind of move into that role of, okay, I'm going to apply for this job and test for lieutenant. When I think of pivotal moments, I would say the most pivotal moment for me in my leadership journey was I had spent some time as lieutenant, and then I had promoted to captain. In Westminster at the time, we had the house captain system. I believe they still have that, where there's a captain in charge of each fire station. And then if the captain's on shift that day, then the lieutenants are on the other days. But it's a team effort between the captain and the two lieutenants between the three shifts. So I'd gotten promoted to captain, and I'd only been in the role about 10 months. And my parents had been killed in a car accident. And so I was dealing with, not in the district, but I was, dealing with that. I was dealing with their estate, dealing with family. And so I look back on that as a pivotal time where I was dealing with so much stuff. And then I'm going to step back and look at myself, what I'm doing with the department, and really consider, should I put in for this next level or not, or just deal with all this other stuff. So that was a real pivotal moment for me. And I should say that part of that decision was, because I really was not interested in that job at the time, but the
Now
pivotal part of it,
not interested in it because it's further away from the tactics and the calls and things like that, or not interested just because it was one more level of responsibility? What kind of mindset did you have in being not
well,
being in?
technically I wasn't eligible for it. I can talk about that in a minute, but I was, because I'd only been a captain for 10 months. And so, I think it was more the issue of not feeling
Mm.
ready to take that step. I mean, I'm new into this second level job. I'm enjoying what I'm doing. I have a crew. I'm in charge of a fire station, and so then, but what ended up happening was the fire chief had a meeting with me, and he says, "I want you to," and that's kind of what started this conversation. I'm kind of doing this backwards. Before I had the conversation with family members, the fire chief had already talked to me and said, "I'd like you to apply for battalion chief." And I said, "Well, I'm not eligible for the job." He, obviously, like he doesn't know, but he does. I'm trying to figure out, why is he telling me this when he knows that the policy is you got to be in your role 12 months before you can go into this other role, And he says, "Well, by the time we make the promotion, you'll be eligible." And
Sounds
so
like
I
a
said,
pretty good
"Okay, I get it."
endorsement.
Yeah. So then we had a long talk about it as far as, well, why did he think? And he just gave me, he just said that he thinks that I'm one of his up and coming leaders, and he thinks I would be good in that role. And he says, you still have to prove yourself. You still have to go through the process. And so then I went back and talked to family, and, I was encouraged to do it, both from the area, what I already talked about of, focusing on something different than all the personal things that were going on at the time, and taking it as a time to reflect on, my career journey. And so back to your question, I think that was the pivotal moment in my leadership journey where I really made a distinct move to move into that. And I ended up getting that promotion. So then I moved on from there as a battalion chief.
Did it feel like I know that the chief said, by the you'll meet the requirements by the time the promotion happens, and probably said, you seem like a good fit, and um did it feel to you though in hindsight that you should have taken longer to get there, or did it feel about right, or what do you think?
For sure. I think I felt like, and well, I think I should have taken longer. I felt like I should have been in my captain role longer. I think I could have learned more in preparation for that. I'd been on a number of incidents and stuff. So the incident response part of the job, I don't think was the issue. It was more the dealing with the higher level leadership decisions Also dealing with now I'm moving into a chief officer level, which is a pretty important level. And then I'm dealing with the chief officers that I haven't had a lot. I've dealt with them obviously, but I haven't been one-on-one in meetings with them, really trying to, shape the leadership of the department. So,
Speaking of shaping the department, when we were talking prior to getting on and recording, you were talking about culture and how culture evolves a little bit. And one thing that you mentioned being passionate about is the relationship between culture and a leader's intent. And I'm curious about that because those just on their face seem like totally different things. But you said sometimes they can align, sometimes they can clash. Talk to me about that tension and what that means to you and why that pairing those 2 together came to mind.
yeah, I feel like when I became a fire chief, and not right away, but in my time as a fire chief, there were a couple different times at Grand Junction where I felt like I either wasn't doing a very good job sharing my intent. And so then, absent information, you know, with a void, then something else is going to fill the void.
Mhm.
And so whether it's the culture of the department that's filling the void or, new culture trying to come in that's filling the void. And so that's what I meant by that. And so the example I give is, I think when it really came home to me is we had so we had been talking for a number of years that we needed more fire stations and needed more staff. Just like a lot of fire departments, you need resources and you're growing, you're responding on a lot of calls, you're just starting to get stretched thin. And so we had worked through a whole process. We had gone to the voters one other time shortly after I had arrived at Grand Junction to build some new fire stations and get staffing for those. That failed. And then various things happened over a number of years. And then we finally brought it back in 2019. That one passed. And so now we're on this trajectory to build some additional fire stations and increase staffing. So I'm on this, my intent is to get that done. We've made a promise in my mind to the voters. We're going to put fire stations in areas where they haven't been. We're going to improve response time, improve customer service. And hire more help. And so, what I feel like didn't do is, so my whole premise was on the service aspect of it, but that also brought the culture clash because we're at this time now we're in that period where we're bringing on multiple different generations of firefighters. And so they may not be hearing my intent of what I'm trying to do. And then I may not be sharing it enough with them to understand what they would like to see also. And so they're still struggling with, we're dealing with the, increase in call volume and how to deal with it. The chief's trying to build a fire station in this other area. Maybe what we'd really rather have is 2 more ambulances at this station instead. you know?
So I'm curious though, obviously as a leader, right, you've got some sense of a big picture or a bigger picture depending on your role. You've got the vision that you want for the organization. You've got other influences like what the board and the community want. So it's natural to think maybe I'm not articulating this well and maybe I need to do better explaining the why or the desired end state or whatever, right? But
hmm
is the culture ever a demand signal that maybe you need to take a step back and say, "Hey, there's a piece of this I'm not maybe clear on or not listening to, and I need to pay attention because it's important," right? Like, maybe we are moving too fast or not. Do you ever feel torn that the culture is maybe to some degree, at least, the ground truth of what should be paid attention to?
I would agree with you. Yeah, I think, and maybe that's the piece I missed because I think as a leader, a lot of times it's just what you said. Either we've put together this whole plan and we have vetted it with both, my boss and in this case, what I'm talking about is my boss, the city manager, the city council. They all know what we're doing, and I believe that I've vetted it with my staff, certainly my leadership team, my other chief officers, my leadership team. But maybe that's not getting to the rank and file and where are they on it. And so that culture it's actually probably just as or more important because those are the people that are executing the plan, really. I mean, ultimately, when all this is done, fire stations are built, apparatus is bought, people are hired. They're the ones doing the job. They're the ones on the street. And so that culture and how they reflect on it is so important, I think, because really and what I've learned in being a fire chief and being a firefighter, we're all really on the same page. It's just we just have a different way maybe of looking at it and doing, maybe our timing's a little bit.
Right. Right. And you got to sort through what's real and what's not real, right? Like I'm reflecting on the saying in the army, and I'm sure the fire service, if people aren't complaining, then there's something wrong, right?
Yeah.
So there's some aspect of that to sort through, but you're right. Like you can only go as fast as the culture is willing to go, or you're willing to impose on the culture, and you got to kind of reconcile all those things.
Yeah.
Um, it's tough though. One other thing that you mentioned is supporting with leadership from the middle of the organization, focusing on battalion chiefs, captains, and other people that translate that intent or that strategic vision into action. Can you talk to me a little bit about what that means to you and why that's such an important piece instead of either a bottom up or a top down driven organization? Why the middle?
Well, yeah, I have a saying that I used to say all the time that, and I think you could apply it to just about any organization, but I used to say that we live and die by the captain in the fire service. And my example of that is in Grand Junction, we only had one level of company officer, which was the captain level. And so and this falls right in with the leader's intent and the culture, I think. If I am presenting my intent, what I'm trying to do as the chief, and it's flowing through my chief officers, my deputy chiefs, my battalion chiefs to the captains, and I'm getting agreement on that, and I'm hearing that they support that, and then they're sending it down to the troops, and the troops are executing it, then we're all good. But somewhere along there could be a snag. Either I have not done a good job of articulating my intent, and so they're not hearing exactly what I'm trying to do, and then they're trying to react to that. They're trying to anticipate. Or unfortunately, sometimes I think you have maybe someone in that level that maybe doesn't agree with what we're trying to do. And we always say that let's if we have a disagreement on an issue, let's settle it. Then when we open the door, we come out with as a team
Hmm.
on whatever it is, whether it's a new proposal or whatever. But sometimes I think that's a little bit Pollyannish. I guess that's not. It's probably not a common fire term, but I think that's a little bit Pollyannish to think that always happens because people are thinkers. We hire thinkers, and so they have their own thoughts about it. But if we have a member of the leadership team or a captain or somebody that maybe doesn't quite agree with it, then they could tweak it a little bit and change it, and then that could change the outcome at the end, which I think that then leads to this culture clash that I was talking about earlier, where, um, that my intent may not be getting through because of the culture has decided something else.
What were some ways that you would, on a practical level, besides just like generally feeling that things were going in the right direction, what were some specific things that you did to figure out if your captains or your battalion chiefs really truly understood your intent?
Yeah, the key on that, I think, is so much as just communication and collaboration on these things. And so try to not make decisions in a vacuum and then make sure everything's sent out well. So I tried to pride myself on, and it's tough as a leader because, it takes time, but I really tried to pride myself on open and direct communication with all levels of staff. So whether that meant I did video chats
Mhm.
with the department. I tried to get out to the fire stations as many times as I could. Unfortunately, that's the thing that takes the longest because usually when you're out there, it's not just one topic. Usually, it's multiple topics. But if I can get out to the fire station and talk individually with a crew and hear their feedback, then that's probably the most efficient and effective way. I shouldn't say
Mhm.
efficient, but the most effective way to hear. We certainly had normal staff meetings that took minutes and sent minutes out, those kind of things. We would do, multi-day retreats to talk about our, strategic planning and, cross section of the department was involved in setting the strategic goals and the plan for the year, those kind of things. So, try to have as many avenues as possible to provide information, but also provide the opportunity for feedback as you can. But I think sometimes, no matter what you do, as much as you try, there can be a struggle there somewhere. Where either the message is just not heard the right way. You have somebody's off when this all happens, and then they come back and they hear a different version. So that can happen. And then, I think as leaders, we always have to be aware of the other leaders in the department that may not be traditional leaders.
Hmm.
And so I think certainly if you have a union, a local, which most agencies here in Colorado now have firefighter locals, that organization and those leaders, they are just as important in the leadership role as traditional leaders, because they are hearing from the troops, if not in many cases more than the traditional leaders are, about what people feel and what they
Mhm.
see happening in the department, and what they would be their hopes and dreams for the department.
And they have great amount of influence too, informal
And they have a
influence.
great amount of influence. The key, and there's various ways that you deal with that issue. Certainly there's departments that many that have collective bargaining agreements where you can address many of those things through that. But there's, I think, really the again, face-to-face conversation. Take time to meet with those leaders of the local, and different areas of the department. Maybe it's an issue also. Maybe it's just in one area of the department. Let's say it's a fire prevention issue, and so you have leaders in there too that you're going to meet with to try and talk through an issue. So
Back to intent for a second. One thing that I was recently just talking to another department about. One thing we did in the Army that was really effective, and it seems very simplistic, but it was the brief back. So you would articulate intent, whether it was like through a mission order brief or something like that, and you would say to the subordinate leaders, you'd say, take 15, 20 minutes, digest it, come back to me and brief back to me what you think my intent was. And then you could just see eye to eye and say, you're tracking, you got it, go execute, or you need to tweak it a little bit because what I meant was this rather than this. And just doing that one extra step lets you understand if they're tracking picking up what you're putting down.
uh, that's right on. And I'll admit, I wish I would have done more of that, because I think so many times let's say we're having a topic that we're talking about in a staff meeting with just battalion chiefs maybe. And so, battalion chiefs and deputy chiefs, and we're in a meeting, we're talking about this issue, and then, okay, everybody got it? Okay, go forth and multiplier, and then later on you find out, well, I'll give you a perfect example of that. I had a group of battalion chiefs, and one of them was a unbelievable note taker, and then another one didn't take notes, but he felt like he could remember everything really well. And so, many times a topic would come down and we would settle on it. And then the battalion chiefs would go out and present, here's the minutes from the staff meeting. We're talking about this issue. And then, the one that took the copious notes, he would present, he would have all the stuff. His crew would get all that stuff. And then, then maybe one of his crew is working overtime on another shift. And that crew's talking about this same issue. And this guy says, "Well, that's not anything what they talked about at the staff meeting." And so it's like,
You
so making
sometimes
sure that
wish you
message is
had the
clear.
the tape recording. Hey, can we play back the tape here?
Yeah.
So you lead, or you develop through Westminster, become a deputy chief there, and then you lead Grand Junction to amazing things. I'm sure Grand Junction looked nothing like it does today, 17 years ago, and through a whole bunch of change, you lead that organization to greatness. Then you think about retiring, right? And now you find yourself as the executive director of the Colorado State Chiefs. How does that happen?
Pressure from others. It happens so I think one thing with being a leader is you can't always just be a leader just for your own organization. Certainly, there are people that is their goal and that's what they do. But I always felt like if we're giving back to the fire service that has given, in my example, I felt like the fire service had given me so much, a lifelong career, two different organizations, both high performing organizations. How do I give back and share what I've done to help? And so, I started going out and doing other things like, getting on boards and commissions, both in the community locally and also in the fire service. And so one of the things was I got on the Colorado State Fire Chiefs Board of Directors, went up through those chairs to president, and then left there, went to the International Association of Fire Chiefs Missouri Valley Division, went up through those chairs to their president. So a lot of different statewide and national roles while still working as the fire chief in Grand Junction. So that gave me the ability to be very familiar with the Colorado State Fire Chiefs, their mission, what they had done over the years. And so when the previous executive director, Gary Brees, who was in place for 11 years and did miraculous, great work for the Colorado State Fire Chiefs and and our whole state, statewide. So he and I started talking about a time frame for retirement for both him and I. We were close. I was on the board when Gary was hired, and so Gary had reached out to me and along with members of his staff about, would you consider being on a short list for Gary's replacement? Because they knew I was getting close to thinking about retiring from Grand Junction. So we started talking actually a couple of years ago now, and then worked toward timing of that. And, I agreed to move into this role and continue on trying to help the fire service.
So, for those that aren't familiar with the state chiefs, what can you tell the audience about what the state chiefs does or what the mission is and what support it provides departments across Colorado, right?
Mhm.
Is it just a bunch of chiefs sitting around drinking coffee, having conversations, or is there more to it? I know there's more to it, but I
Yeah, no. We're a membership organization of chiefs, although it's a little bit different than most people think. I think most people think that the chief is the member, but for the Colorado State Fire Chiefs, it's the department that's the member. We do that intentionally. And that is so that any member of a Colorado Fire Department that's one of our members can enjoy the benefits of that. And that would be whether we're putting on events, they get membership pricing for that. Probably even the bigger thing for that is that we provide a lot of communication out to our members, our member departments all throughout the year. We put on different events. We put on a couple different leadership events. Our main one is what you talked about, our Fire Leadership Challenge that happens in October. It's intentionally meant to not be just a fire chiefs conference, but it's a leadership conference. And so we really are encouraging all levels of leadership to attend and, being able to learn and apply new leadership skills. We put on a shorter, briefer version a couple times during the year, critical issues briefing, where we really try to hit the trending and new things that are happening in our state. And so but then through all that, becoming a member also gives you access to the networking through the membership to all of our members. It also gives you access to what we're doing right now. Right now, we're deep into the legislative session. A lot of what we do is legislative work for the Colorado Fire Service, where we're dealing with wildfire bills, health and safety bills, funding bills, those kind of things. Anything that we think can help and improve the Colorado Fire Service.
So is the voice and the support and the representation equal, would you say, for a small, tiny volunteer department in the hinterlands of Colorado somewhere versus one of the larger metro departments here on the Front Range?
Well, my goal certainly is that it would be equal. We try to do everything we can to make it so. Certainly understand that the departments have different issues that they're dealing with. And so a lot of times what happens is, I may be dealing with a metro chief on some issues that a smaller volunteer department out on, say, on the Eastern Plains isn't dealing with, but they have their own issues that we think are important that we want to support them on also. I think a great example of that is something we're dealing with right now. We've been dealing with funding challenges for the last couple of years with the statewide reductions in property tax. We created what I would say is a partial solution where fire districts can go out to their voters and ask for permission to have a sales tax or impact fees. But that solution really only affects certain departments. So we still have other departments and fire districts that doesn't necessarily help them with their funding. And so we are actively looking for what are the ways we can help those departments with their funding challenges also. And so back to your question is that's how I look at it, is like we're here for the entire Colorado Fire Service. Doesn't matter what size department, doesn't matter what, how many calls they go on every year. what their population base is, but what can we do to help that department, that community, those firefighters and chiefs that really, could use the support.
I think it's interesting that you guys work hand in hand with state level, organizations like DFPC and others, but you guys are completely independent. So whatever you feel as an organization through the board and the membership and you as the executive director are the important issues may a lot of times be hand in hand with the state, but sometimes they're different, right?
hmm Yeah, and that's true of all of our. So we have a number of partnerships, certainly that some are legislative partners. Although I think it's interesting because I think most of our partners are they're partners in just about everything we do. It doesn't matter if it's legislation or putting on the conference or providing different leadership things. But yeah, we work hand in hand a lot of times with DFPC on issues. Sometimes it with them being a state agency, sometimes they're pushing an issue and we're supporting them. Sometimes we're pushing the issue and they're supporting us or they're giving us feedback to help with that. We try to be on the same page with our partners as much as we can, but sometimes we disagree. So, I think we disagree professionally and we try to make sure that our partners understand why we're taking a stance maybe a different way. When it comes to, and our other partners that are similar to that is we have a close relationship with the CPFF, the Colorado Professional Firefighters. We work with them and have worked with them many times on different legislative bills that are really a lot on the health and safety, labor management relations, those kind of things with them. We work closely with the Special District Association on different legislative work, or they put on an excellent conference. Also, we try to participate in that, and same with Colorado Municipal League from the municipal side. So those are a few of our partners that we work with frequently throughout the year on both legislative issues and other issues that are affecting the Colorado Fire Service.
So, since we were talking about intent and vision and leaders leading an organization, when you're done with your 11-year run as executive director, like Gary, what's a top thing in your mind that you would like the organization to get to in whenever that point in the future is?
I would like to see every fire department in Colorado be a member, and we're
There's
not
how
there
many?
yet.
300 and how many? 30 something?
So that's part of the problem. We don't really know. We estimate somewhere around 350, 375 fire departments in the
Really?
state. Yeah, it's interesting because there's just so many different types. You have obviously municipal fire departments that are a department under a city. You have fire districts, you have fire authorities, we have small departments that are not legally a fire district, but they are doing great work for their community and they're raising their funds through pancake breakfasts and those kind of things. And so those are the ones that we probably aren't as much aware of. But um, and I say that as a goal, not because we need their dues to continue the organization, although we do need their dues. But it's really about the cooperation and the communication. I really believe that we accomplish so much more together, um, and being able to talk and network and communicate and what are the issues out there? What's the issues for a small department on the Eastern Plains that we may not be aware of in the metro area, or a small department on the Western Slope that they're struggling with an issue, and if they know that they can turn to us for help, and we may not have we may not have an answer right away, but maybe we can figure out a way to help them. I think that's what's so important about that, and that's why that's one of my. I think that if I could walk away with, that'd be an amazing thing.
I love that vision because I'm sitting here thinking that my vision is exactly the same, that I would love to work with all 300 and however many departments there are in Colorado.
Yeah.
Well, Chief, as we wind down here, I got a couple of closeout questions for you. Looking back in your career, what's one leadership lesson that you totally know that you learned the hard way, but it still shapes how you lead today?
Sure. Throw me the softballs first and then the hard ball. No. Yeah. And I've reflected on this because I will admit to you and your listeners that there were times that this one I struggled with it enough that I would sit back and reflect: Is this my time to go?
Mm.
Have I am I- have I worn out my time here as the leader, and I should let someone else, you know, take the seat and hold the reins, so to speak. And what I believe that is, I'll try and articulate what I think it is, but really I grew up in a time in my leadership journey that we were all about collaboration and empowerment of employees, and I think those are all important. But I think where I learned my lesson is that is not always the answer for everything. And at some point, if you're a leader that's like I was, where I'm always looking for collaboration, I'm looking to put teams and task forces together, work on things. I'm looking to empower people to do the work. I'm looking, maybe I'm more of a soft-spoken leader, expecting that in return from my employees that they're going to do that. But what I learned the hard way was sometimes you just have to be the leader. You just have to step up and say, I'm making the decision on this and we're moving on. And I think that that's the main thing that I've reflected on back, where I think I've learned it the hard way, because I worked so hard to try to involve people in decisions that some of those decisions didn't need the involvement and probably shouldn't have had the involvement. And it really fell back on me as the chief to say, on this decision, I'm making this decision, we're moving on. And so
Ultimate
with
ultimately,
that,
when in charge, take charge, right?
exactly, yeah. And I think sometimes um, yeah, we forget that part, that, that I guess you could say at the bottom line is you're hired to be the leader. And so there comes a time where that's really the only answer.
Yeah. No, I like it. All right, last question for you, Chief. And I'm repurposing a question that I often ask people. I often ask them, what advice that they would give to a new leader stepping into a leadership role for the first time. But since you are leading the state chiefs as the executive director, I'm going to word this. What if you could sit down with a brand new chief, not a brand new leader, but somebody that's in a chief role, stepping into that role with a white helmet for the first time? What advice would you give that chief?
Well, I would, brand new in the role, I think what I would say to them is, first of all, take time. Don't be in a hurry. And it depends a little bit about whether they're an internal chief that's moved up through the ranks or if they're an external chief. But ultimately, I think it's probably similar. And that is, take the time to learn the department, learn what's happening, what are the issues that are going on, um, before you start changing everything. So, and that, I think that's just a basic leadership principle. But the other thing I think I would tell them is that, never forget that, the importance of your people and what they bring to the organization. And so I think sometimes we in chief roles, in leadership roles, we feel like, well, I'm talking in circles a little bit. I apologize, but we want to make the decisions, we want to get things done and everything, but don't forget that, don't leave your people behind. Don't forget that the people have to be engaged and part of that too for you to be successful. So make sure you're working with your teams, your employees, your union to get things done, hearing from them what's important, having the open dialogue, feedback back and forth. And then, you know, like we just talked about, what's the lesson I learned then? And then make the decision. You got to, that's what we're really here to do as the leader, is you got to make the decision, let everyone know what that is, and move on, to the next
Yeah.
thing. So,
I like it. Good stuff there. And it's hard, and do the best you can
yeah.
and lots of other things that go with it, right? Well,
The other thing
Ken, I
is, I think
appreciate you.
in this role here, what I would say that, I would offer is, you're not alone, and many days you'll feel alone.
Yeah,
And so find somebody that you can reach out to. And it could be me. I mean, I offer that up to anyone. If you're struggling and you need somebody to talk to that's been in the trenches, call me. I mean, that's part of my role, I feel like, is to help chiefs and especially new chiefs. But other times, if you have somebody that's a mentor to you, I had that. I had the chief that called me into his office and said, I want you to apply for battalion chief. He was a mentor he's still a mentor for me. But when I went into the role at fire chief in Grand Junction, I called him a number of times and said, hey, I'm struggling with this. How did you deal with this when you were doing the role? And, if you have somebody that you can bounce things off of, that's important.
definitely. Good thoughts to leave us with. Ken, I certainly appreciate you joining me today for your decades of service to the fire service here in Colorado and beyond. Your leadership at both the department level and the state level now continues and will continue to have a lasting impact on the profession. So thank you for that. Thank you for the great conversation today. Thank you to everybody for being part of today's conversation. If something here has resonated, pass it on to someone in your circle. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the podcast, leave a quick review, and check out convergentimpact.com for additional leadership resources. Until next time, continue to lead well, take care of your people, and keep setting the example.
Thank you.